Greetings, Clausewitz here. So, why I don't consider art as good evidence? So, the thing is with art, and I mean by that things like paintings, drawings, literature in the sense of poems, stories, um, and arts which concern like shaping sculptures or similar things. So basically everything we consider as pretty, as decorative, even if there is meaning in it or practical usage sometimes. But basically when we think something is aesthetic or pretty or on the purpose on being those things. So because the term art can of course apply to a lot of things, not so much only about things which has to be beautiful or emotional or stuff like this. And I'm basically concentrating mostly of those past I mentioned lastly. So why I don't think it's good evidence when we ask ourselves questions about history. I mean, it's of course depending on the question. If we have questions like which art they used or had or held high, or how they were painting their artworks, stuff like this, then of course then the art we find of this time is pretty good. It's very good evidence for this. Actually needed for this. But if it's about events, if it's about more information based evidence in the sense of okay, which person existed, which faction existed, what they did, what they wanted, what happened in the history of humankind, then art it's for itself not so good evidence. Actually, many things are for themselves not good evidence, because many things we actually want to check regarding humans is of course created by humans, and there can be lots of different purposes behind it. This is the main issue I have with art here, because if we have, for example, a painting and we have the depiction of an event in there, then that this depiction, how it is and that it is even there, can be have different purposes, different motivations behind. Like maybe the artist actually was want to spread this specific opinion. Maybe he actually believed that everything he does is legit or good, or maybe he faked some information in it. Maybe he believed somebody else who faked something. Maybe he was misinformed, he misinterpreted something. Maybe he just did something because he thought it was pretty, because he thought it was cool, it was fashionable. Maybe wanted to prove something more about like wearing a good, being a good craftsman, or a good artist, a skillful artist. Maybe it was a real event he depicting, and so but we have all those purposes, motivations, reasons, which are basically all equal to each other, because we know people doing things out of those reasons. And just to have a piece of art and to just assume, oh yeah, it's because this is a real event. This is a proof that this event happened, or that this faction or this character or this turn in events happened, or that they did something a certain way because we see it here, is just not enough evidence. Because it could be fake. It could be due to technical limitation. Not even a bad fake intention. It's not like, oh, he depicts like a specific type of armor because he just wanted to to increase the sales of this armor smith. This is what I don't mean. Of course, this can be also a reason. But the point is that he maybe just can really draw or paint this specific kind of armor, or this shape of armor or shape of weapon or whatever, because this is what he actually trained a lot and actually wanted to make good work or whatever, or it was very fashionable. Actually, he doesn't knew any better, or he didn't knew any better. Maybe he just thought this was armor back then as well, because he lived like in the 15th century and was depicting something happened in the 9th century, and how could he knew that this armor wasn't around since 500 years? Why shouldn't he even care about this? I mean, this is not like you would every day have in school the teacher telling you, oh, this is the armor we used 500 years ago. So, you see, this is basically my main issue with this. And this is also why I see actually often art, paintings for example, very much prominent in here, depicting something regarding Roman history, regarding Macedonian history, like Alexander the Great, and then actually seeing things we don't find. Like today we are sure that this is, means sure that this doesn't exist, but we couldn't find anything which is depicted. Sometimes. Depends, some actually have a mixture in it. Sometimes you see in such a pictures like, oh, Xyphos, or Style of helmet, we actually had findings from it. And also you see types of armor, types of shields, and types of other weapons which are clearly not from this era, or basically we have no evidence that it was in this era. And this is what I mean. We have actually interpretations of those artists, like what they thought they had or what they believed they had. And sometimes you even see depictions of scenes of the classical era, which actually is like in plate armor, which is in a medieval style. Maybe to make it comprehensible for the people, maybe the artist thought by himself, oh, that people should get an understanding. They don't want to confuse people looking at this art, so I may give it a shape which they were aware of, which they were used to, which is the next purpose, the next motivation, something to do, which is not like ill-minded or evil-minded, but because we can't really determine the reasons behind it, it's pretty hard to determine. Therefore, we should stay a little bit away from it. I'm not saying it's bad evidence all the way through. It can't be used for anything else besides like the history of art itself. It's of course a hint, and it can of course be a cross-reference. If I have findings, if I have different kinds of different artists which are independent of each other and stuff like this, then we of course can pretty much, this is then supportive evidence for it. We can say, okay, we have those findings, those weapons, tools, whatever, and we have also a description of somebody using these tools, and we have this painting of exactly these tools, so that they had these tools and used them a lot. It's pretty high likelihood. And this is the next thing in history, basically, which I want to address here. It's mostly about the likelihood of something. And we can prove general questions very easy, like which kinds of plants they used in agriculture, which kinds of animals, in animal husbandry they used, and which kind of tools and weapons they had. Basically, this is a very basic question, easy to answer, because basically you just need like find one tool, and this is already answered, like, oh, this tool was in their repertoire. It's not even necessary to determine how many, because this is another question which gets more specific, which is like how many of those tools they were using, or was it common to use those tools? All those more specific questions. Or as it gets more specific, it gets harder to prove. And this is here what I want to address with art, because art already starts with this hard to prove situation. The information in art itself, it's mostly already hard to prove that this is actually this information we're looking for, like a true event, the depiction of a true event. Could be just a fantasy depiction, could be propaganda, could be something the artist was inspired by a real event just to make something pretty, or something he just loved to do. All those reasons, or he maybe wasn't really able to do it otherwise because of technical limitations or his own training. For example, when the Bayeux Tapestry, I think it was called, where the Battle of Hastings is depicted, and like basically the conquest of England by William the Conqueror. Mike Clausewitz was showing this piece and was pointing out the riders, the cavalrymen, and was saying, oh, look how close their feet are to the ground when they're sitting on the horse. They had very small horses. I mean, Mike Clausewitz could mean it maybe as a cross-reference, but I just want to take it here as itself, because this shows basically what I mean. Because maybe the artist did this scale because he couldn't do it better. Maybe the whole tapestry would be just bigger or more expensive, and he just did something where he knew, okay, this is clearly seen as a cavalryman. This is fine. I don't have to make it perfect scale. I want to fit so many things in here. I want to that people see what I mean here, and so on and so on. Maybe he actually thought it was the scale. Actually, it was the scale. But this is where we need more evidence from somewhere else. Basically, like remains of those horses, and to determine like was it really so, or not, how it is depicted. And yeah, but this is like an issue maybe just due to like the circumstances where the art is created, like it's a tapestry, but basically it's not painted or so. Maybe he couldn't do it better in the circumstances, maybe because of training or of like cost, efficiency, stuff like this. And this is why, yeah, we have to take everything with a grain of salt. And the funny thing is actually, and I'm just like arguing for art as not being good evidence, because so often we just assume art is right. Like, oh, we see it in art. We see this and this in art, question answered. I saw this and mentioned this, just to give you an example. But East basically did this with the rapier. This is what I mentioned in my rapier video as well, that on the question did the rapier was used on the battlefield, or was it a battlefield weapon? He said yes, it was. We see it in the art of the day that it was used, or it was worn by soldiers. I won't say that he has no better evidence, so I mean he can explain pretty well what weapons have which advantages. And I don't want to quote Belize so much on this here. But basically this was like his main argument in this specific video. We see it in art. And the thing is, like I said, it can be a support for this. But solely for itself, it's pretty poor, and I have so better other reasons why it's not a good battlefield weapon, seeing in my video. And but this is what I mean. We kind of assume just somebody made pictures, somebody created art about soldiers having rapiers. We just assume this is right. They all had rapiers. It's fine. This is enough. And this was widely used or so on, or it was practical to use. This is also something sometimes we ask ourselves, or was this a good technique or something useful? And we then just go with, oh, it's an art, therefore it is. And I encounter this a lot through my life, that we just consider art as meaningful, especially if it's art from our history. Because if you look at Hollywood movies, for example, or video games, we so often are very quick, have even dedicated YouTube channels or dedicated people just to point out what is not realistic, what is untrue, what is stupid, what is basically false claim, or even propaganda to some extent in our art today. So basically we don't assume that our artists today actually depict the truth or realism or whatever. We're aware of it and often even argue about that, oh, this is fiction, it wants to be fiction, so this is fine, it's not unrealistic. But in the same time, about artists back in the day, then we just assume it's all right, it's all realistic, it's all depicting the truth. I'm of course kind of describe it a little bit over the top here. It's not everybody thinks this, of course, but this is what I had this impression of mostly, and yeah, my arguments basically. I don't think art is good for itself. I'm kind of repeating myself in here right now, and yeah, just to want to bring this out here. So let me know what you think about this if you want to, and I know it's a bit unusual video for me because I mainly do military history stuff, but it's related to history, and especially how we look into informations, into evidence about history. So hope you enjoyed this video anyway, and if so, give it a like, subscribe to my channel. I usually talk about military stuff in here, so hopefully see you soon.